So I just saw Hereditary, and it was good? The hype around Hereditary has been absolutely insane. It's been hype central, and a lot of people are saying that it's the modern day Exorcist. It's this generation's The Shining. It's the scariest movie of the decade. And is it the scariest movie of the decade? No. Is it the modern day Exorcist? No. Is it this generation's The Shining? No. And I'll get into why I don't particularly love this movie a little bit later, but before I get into why I don't think this is the scariest movie of the decade, let's just talk about some positives. Because I do think this is a good movie, but I don't particularly like it. And mainly, the reason that I think it is good is because it is incredibly well made. This movie has some of the greatest technique I've seen in a horror movie in quite some time. The cinematography is so amazing in this film. The way that Ari Astar, the director and writer, uses the camera in this film is unlike a horror movie I've seen in a while. There's some great tracking shots, there's some great flowing one-take shots, there's some great tilt shift cinematography where he makes locations and places look like miniatures, the ones that Toni Collette are making, kind of similar to that. And the lighting is all excellent. The color palette is all excellent. The way that they use the camera in this movie is pretty much flawless and easily the best part of the film. And the sound effects are used incredibly effectively in this film. They use a lot of the surround sound to pinpoint different sound effects to make scenes a little bit more effective. And the soundtrack is great as well. Almost every single piece of score in this film is absolutely perfect. It's incredibly intense, incredibly haunting and creepy. All the time. The score is excellent in this film, as is the sound design, as is the direction and cinematography, and as is the performances. Everyone does an excellent job in this movie. I think everyone's talking about Toni Collette because she is the standout here, but everyone around her, the entire cast, is amazing. Everything that this movie does, technically speaking, is flawless. This movie is as close to a flawlessly presented horror movie as you can probably get. But that's sort of where the positives stop for me. One of my big negatives with this movie is the plot and the storytelling. Constantly, I felt like the drama and horror elements of this film were at odds with each other. It seems like this movie wants to be a supernatural, generic horror movie, as well as an intense family drama where tensions and tempers are rising and people are yelling at each other and throwing each other under the bus.
And I wanted to make a film that worked as a family drama first, before even attending to the horror elements. So the film is a family tragedy that curdles into a horror film.
It seems like it wants to fuse It Comes at Night's family drama with The Conjuring's horror elements, and it feels like it's constantly clashing or at odds with each other in this film, because the first half of the movie is this family drama. The opening scene of the movie is the main family going to their grandma or mom's funeral. They're attending her funeral and talking about her and trying to deal with how she died so abruptly or what she was doing with her past.
And she lived in our house at the end before hospice. We weren't even talking before that. I mean, we were, and then we weren't, and then we were. She's completely manipulative until my husband finally enforced a no-contact rule.
And then about 15 minutes later, we see another person in the family die. The youngest child, Charlie, gets decapitated by a pole. And then from then on, the movie completely changes, where everyone is at odds with each other, where they don't know who to blame, who's responsible, and there are things that are bubbling up between them that are sort of being released via dream sequences, which were sort of one thing that I did not like particularly about this movie. A lot of the quote-unquote horror elements of the movie are done in nightmare sequences, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It Comes at Night does them incredibly well, but almost every single time there's a scare in this movie, it is a dream sequence, so that it doesn't really feel like a scare in the end, because you just know, oh, this is a nightmare. just forget about it because it didn't actually happen. And because of this, the movie's not really that scary until the last 15 minutes or so, because everything mildly intense or frightening that happens is in dream sequences, which is kind of frustrating. But then, at about the halfway point, Toni Collette and this girl named Joan have a little seance, and the movie changes again, and I think it changes for the worse, in my opinion. The first hour or so of this film I thought was pretty great, pretty enjoyable, but the last hour is basically just a generic monster horror possession movie in a way, where it's just, they do a seance, something comes into their house, and oh no, there's something in the dark, flip on the light, oh, it's gone, oh, that's so scary. Oh, there's a clicking sound and it's a jump scare. Oh no. Oh, it's actually nothing there. Oh, darn. And it's this kind of horror that I really don't like in movies, when they try to fake scare you or try to put in these long sequences of like black spaces in the frame, and then something comes out and oh, the character didn't see it, so it's just gonna fade away. And it's this horror style that Hereditary adopts that I don't particularly like, and it's sort of why I ended up not loving this movie, because the first half is an interesting character drama, and then the last half is just The Conjuring kind of horror, where these two things don't really meet. The character drama is sort of dropped as the Conjuring style possession horror starts. And then we get this whole elaborate backstory about how the grandma of the family was in these rituals and cults, and she was with a bunch of friends and they did these rituals, and it looks like they're trying to bring this devil king into the real world. And it's this stuff that makes the plot so thick and clouded to the point where it's very hard to understand what is happening or why anything's happening. It makes everything so needlessly convoluted by the end. And then the last shot of the movie is like, oh yeah, I saw exactly where that's going, where this guy possesses this guy. And it's like, oh, you already gave it away by showing this book that says this demon king prefers a male body. It's like, yeah, I get it. I know where this is going. So in the end, the movie is sort of predictable, sort of generic, and sort of uninteresting. I would say that the majority of the film is sort of unevenly paced because it is trying to mesh this family drama and this horror movie together, and it doesn't really work. There are scenes of straight up drama and straight up horror that just completely clash with each other, and then there's scenes that kind of mix the two, and it doesn't really work. So I don't know really what to feel about Hereditary. I'm sort of at odds with it as it is itself. I don't know what I feel towards it. The only thing I know for sure is that it is amazingly well made. And so for that reason, I don't really think this movie is that great. I think it's probably a 7 out of 10. So anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.